Hey folks, so today we're having a look at my personal keyboard build. I started buying parts for it last summer and only recently I've been able to finish it. It's a 60% keyboard built in a Tofu case, maybe not the most exciting build ever, but I'm happy with how clean it looks. It features a brass plate, penguin switches, and PolyCaps black on white keycaps from Kinetic Labs. Sounds fun? Well, let's have a look. So I decided to go with a 60% Tofu case from KBD Fans in E-White. I have to say the paint looks really good and I think it's worth the extra money compared to anodized aluminum. As for the PCB, I went with 1UP Keyboard's Hot Swap 60% PCB. It was one of the only options in stock back then. It only has underglow LEDs, but I didn't want LEDs for this build anyway, so it's all good. As for the switches, I wanted to go with Aqua Zilents V2s initially, but as you'll see, I'll end up using penguin switches from Kinetic Labs. As for the stabs, I went with the Key Company C² screw-in stabs. I got a standard 60% brass plate from AliExpress, as I thought it would match well with the white case. Finally, I went with XDA Keycaps initially that came from Banggood, but I wasn't a fan of the overall quality, so I'll replace them with PolyCaps black on white keycaps from Kinetic Labs later on, but let's start with the build first. So I started by lubing my stabilizers with Krytox 205 and then installed them on my PCB. I then installed all switches directly on the plate first, and these were lubed with Tribosys 3204. Since the PCB and plate are not held together, it worked pretty decently with this technique as I was able to sandwich the plate and PCB together. Gotta make sure all the pins are straight though, and I wouldn't really recommend this method because of the high risk of bending pins. I added some foam at the bottom of the case and then I screwed the PCB in the case. I then added the keycaps on top and the build was complete. Well, not really. So in the meantime, I got a huge care package from Kinetic Labs in the mail. They sent over a bunch of products, including their carbon GS1 and GS2 lubes, their very own penguin switches, 2 keycap sets, containers to store switches, a switch puller, a stem holder, and finally a t-shirt with a really sick artwork printed at the front. Again, thanks to Kinetic Labs for sending all of that, and I'll make sure to link their shop in the description. So I decided to use penguin switches instead of the Zilio switches I had, and I switched my XDA keycap set for the PolyCaps black on white cherry profile set from that care package. I wasn't satisfied by the XDA set, honestly. The legends were dye subbed and not super contrasty, but the worst part was how some keycaps were warped quite a lot. So I went ahead and lubed these penguin switches with some of that GS1 lube that's meant for tactile switches, because yes, these are tactile with a pretty sharp bump. The ones I got have 67 gram springs, but they also come in 63.5, and you get heavier springs too for keys with stabilizers, which I ended up using for my spacebar to make sure it doesn't get stuck. So I bag lubed the springs with GS1 too, and it seemed to have worked decently well, and then did every switch manually. I have to say, I love the way they look, and they happen to match my channel's logo, and that's pretty cool. Also, hot take, I tend to prefer lubing my stem legs even on tactiles. I feel like it reduces friction and the switches are still very tactile. So yeah, please don't judge me. The stabs color I picked initially didn't match anymore, so I switched to a charcoal gray set and then I installed all switches in there and finally installed the PolyCaps keycaps. These are pretty dope, by the way. They come with a bunch of unusual keys to fit odd layouts such as Alice. So now with a fully built keyboard, let's have a look. So I'm quite pleased with this build. The Tofu case is not something super unique, but it's pretty much flawless, no scratches or anything, and it feels like the finish will be durable. I also really like how the brass plate shines under the keys. I like the white and gold theme we've got going on here. It results in a very stiff typing experience due to the fact that it's a tray mount case and the plate is very hard, which can be okay for tactiles, but linear switch users might want to go with something that has a bit more flex. Finally, it's also fairly heavy due to the thickness of the case. Now to these keycaps, these are really nice for the price. They're selling for $60 and you get a full set plus extras to cover a bunch of non-standard layouts. They're PBT and double shot, so they will be very durable and they feature a cherry profile. They also have F and J keys with deeper dishes, which I really like. I also noted that my spacebar had very minimal warpage, which can happen more easily on PBT sets. The font looks clean, it's straight and well aligned from one key to another. If you're looking for a simple black and white keycap set, you can't really go wrong with this one. Now to the switches, I didn't bother testing them unlubed, but in this current state, they're very nice. They have a pretty sharp tactile bump with no pre-travel. They're meant to mimic ergo clears, which are a cherry clear switch with a lighter spring, and I think they sound pretty good overall. Not too high pitched, even though they're installed on the brass plate. Another great feature with these is that they don't need to be filmed. The housings are pretty tight and don't wobble. With the heavier spring on the spacebar, it doesn't get stuck down. Finally, I think they look super nice. Blue is sort of my go-to color. So yeah, really liking these even visually. I'll probably order some of the 63.5 gram variant as well, but enough talking, I'll let you have a listen. This 1UP keyboard PCB is VIA compatible, so that's pretty cool if you want to configure it, remap keys and change layers. It also has underglow LEDs, which obviously don't serve any purpose here, but it would be great in a polycarb case. The main downside with this PCB is that it has north-facing switch sockets, and that can interfere with thicker cherry profile keycaps, but I didn't notice anything with these PolyCaps keycaps, so not really an issue in this scenario. So to wrap this up, pretty stoked at how clean this build looks and feels. Definitely a board that will look great in pretty much any desk setup. I'll have links to all the parts I used, including the ones I ended up not using down below, so feel free to check them out if you plan on building something similar to this. As always, make sure you like the vid if you did, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, as I'll see you in the next video.